Welcome everyone to this episode of Enlightened Masculinity, where everything is allowed, nothing is forbidden, nothing is taboo, all is encouraged. We're talking about masculinity, but by definition that means we're talking about femininity too, because you can't have left without right, you can't have up without down, you can't have masculine without feminine. So we're really talking about the whole here. We're just giving a perspective because we're two guys, two yoga teachers, 4 eyeballs, 2 inner eyes, that we are giving you our perspectives and our opinions from our experience, from our teachers, from training with our teachers, and some of the innovations that we're including in our life. We got lots of them. We're really high-achieving men that we just don't stop. There is no stop in us. I just don't even know what quit is. I got no quit in me. On whatever it is that I do, there ain't no quit here. You ain't going to see me quit ever. And so I am Yogi Chris, PhD, got a doctorate in engineering, and decided I'm going to be a full-time yoga teacher. And this is what I do. Travel the world, travel the country, teaching yoga. I've got lots of online programs. You can find me everywhere in the description. There's ways to find me, send me a message. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Akashic Records, yoga teacher and senior bio research analyst from Montclair, New Jersey. I'm joining you from Florida. And we're here with Akash, and I want to hand it over to him, give any intro. What are we talking about today? Akash, and how are you doing, brother?
Yes, Yogi Chris, thank you as always for the eloquent introduction, and super excited to be here today. A couple things came to me yesterday between the No Fucks Given podcast with Arash, some check-ins with Vince, as well as personal research that I've been doing and questions and such that people have brought to me today. Or over the past couple of days. I actually just finished a photo shoot yesterday, so starting my modeling career as well. It's been a crazy year of doing probably at least 7 or 8 new different things, but really taking it to the top. So that was really, really exciting. Before we continue, Yogi Chris, my dad, as I mentioned, had a question that he asked me privately on Instagram. And that was it worth getting your PhD?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. The longer answer is I didn't need it for what I'm doing. But, I look back, there's always this tendency for like an existential question of like, what if I had gone a different way? And where would I be right now if I had chose differently 10 years ago, or this or that? I would not be a yoga teacher if it wasn't for the flexibility that graduate school afforded me. I was earning enough that I could live like comfortably as a student, I guess. I mean, I'm not even going to tell you what I was making, but they paid for my graduate school. And so with the flexibility that came with that, I was really able to dive into my consciousness through the yoga practices, and which will naturally like really stir up a lot of dirt from your subconscious. And my schedule kept shifting, and so long story short, my ability to dive deep into even the practices of pickup artistry, but definitely my practices of yoga, was afforded because of the nature of being a graduate student, professional researcher. I mean, I was getting paid to research, and then it was just expected that I take classes also. And so that goes back even further, like that. My ability to do yoga came from my ability to wrestle. And so wrestling actually led me to yoga. And now, sometimes I think in hindsight, what if I started doing yoga when I was 18? I wonder where I'd be right now. It's like, well, wrestling is what got me to that point. Wrestling is what got me in school. It got me doing engineering. I only went to college so I could wrestle. That was it. Like if I could have done wrestling on that level without going to college, for sure, would have done it. And the only opportunities for that were doing Olympic style. And I didn't want to do Olympic style. I wanted to win in the country. I wanted to be a national champion. And it sounds, without going into the details of wrestling, so I had to go to college to wrestle. And so I chose subjects that I was good at, and I just kind of kept going with that. And I thought I had found a purpose in PhD because I was like just dabbling with yoga. I had definitely done tons of psychedelic drugs, had experienced like things like that. And I was dabbling with yoga, but I really hadn't found the connection. Like, I hadn't found a psychedelic experience in my yoga practice yet. I found a lot of relief from the pressures in my body, from anxiety, from just all sorts of contractions in my energy and my mind. Like, I just found expansion, which was relieving. And so I kept doing it. But I thought PhD was what I wanted to do. I mean, I was going it was a environmental engineering sciences. It was a kind of what you call environmental economics. I was like, measuring variables in nature and giving dollar values to it, things like that. That's a really simplified version of it, but basically to inform policy. So I was going to go to government and tell them, hey, this is what the value of nature is. This is what you should tax people, this or that. So it's going to be a very top-down kind of approach to it. And when I got into yoga, I was like, this is going to work perfectly. Like, I'm going to be the perfect list out yogi professor. I was on track to be the successor of my advisor, who is one of the foremost names in my discipline in the world. And so I was on track to live a comfortable life the rest of my life, monetarily, There were still problems. One was I was around beautiful women all the time. I'm on a college campus that had 50,000 undergraduates and, big in sororities, big in Greek life, big in sports. There's just lots of beautiful people at the University of Florida. And I didn't know how to talk to any of them. I was like, shit, like, I'm so great in my yoga practice. I'm so smart. I'm publishing papers. And in a field that isn't my field, I had 7 years of higher education in industrial engineering, which is totally unrelated. Like, aside from the mathematics, it's just totally unrelated. And I was succeeding in it, but I didn't know how to talk to people. And so I got into the really dating, and then I got into the pickup artist stuff. And I found that there was so much freedom and independence of choice, like becoming an independent man, not relying on other people to, let's say, make social connections, not relying on other people for approval. And when I started going into that, I really became disillusioned with the academic system because of how much you as a man depended on other people for your approval. You depended on them for your funds. You depended on them for, applause. Without those applause, you can't be a professor. Like, you got to get the applause. And so I found that it was starting to compete. My independence as a masculine figure, as a man, was at odds with the university system, which is very socialist. And I'm not here to talk about the pros and cons of that, but it was just at odds. If you want to be a strong, independent man, it's going to be difficult to climb your way through a socialist organization, and unless you hide it. And I didn't want to do that. But I found my yoga very much related with that. Yoga was very much an emphasis on independence. Independence as a being. Do not seek approval from anything outside of yourself. And so I started going down that road, and it was a big existential conundrum. For like 6 months, I was just like, I didn't have hair, but I was like ripping my hair out. Like, what am I going to do here? Like, I'm on track to be a professor. Like, I'm going to graduate. I'm going to have, college loan investments to pay back. Like, am I going to really be a yoga teacher? Like, come on. I had people that were telling me, don't do that. Like, you have a PhD, or you're going to get a PhD. And I didn't even know if I wanted to finish my PhD. Like, it took me 5 years to get a PhD. I should have been able to finish it in 3. If I had stayed on the first 6 to 8 months, like the work ethic I had in those first 6 to 8 months, if I had kept that up, it would have been 3 years, no problem. A PhD isn't hard, guys. Just so you know, like, if you have intelligence, everyone here I think has enough intelligence, PhD actually isn't that hard. The hard part about a PhD is the isolation of it, like the non-human contact of it, unless you're in some kind of PhD that does that. But for like the hard sciences, to get a PhD is how long can you hold out not killing yourself, There's a lot of graduate students that are just depressed as fuck, And I see them now in the way they talk, and it's just like, did I talk like that? I was so monotone. Like, there was no emotional frequency to me. I was just like a drone sound. And yet I was smart because I could represent symbols in my head and write about it, but whatever. So I was plagued with that decision for about 6 to 8 months, or whatever it was, a year and a half, I don't remember. And I met Arash Dibazar in person. When I met him in person, it was in the middle of that conundrum. And I asked him, I'm like, what do you think? And I need to get off at 1 because I have a private lesson. Hold on, let me respond to that really quick. And I met Arash Dibazar, and I asked, what do you think about this PhD thing? He was like, how close are you? I was like, about 3 or 4 months. And he's like, well, those letters mean something, like, even if you don't use that degree like that, you'll get a lot of clout from that. And it was the first like rational advice I'd heard on that subject. Everybody else was, they had their own like my family had their own reputations at stake, or so they thought. And, my friends, they had their own reputations at stake. somehow being related to me. Am I going to be a doctor or not? Um, people that I was paying as teachers, they had their own agendas, but Arash had this like objective agenda. It seemed like, hey, listen, those letters mean something. If you're close, finish. Why not? It was just like an assertive, like, yeah, why not? I still drug my feet and took 12 months to finish because I was just like pouting like a little boy. I don't want to do this. Like, but I get the world record for doing the absolute least work to earn a PhD in the history of all engineering PhDs. And I did it so well because of my ability to communicate. When it came to my time to defend my position, they call it a defense because all of the professors attack your opinion, basically. And because I knew how to talk and deflect, and because of my training with, especially with Vince on that level, I submitted them. There was no chance. My conclusions were questionable. Let's just say, the whole science is questionable. What I was doing, it's environmental sciences. It's just like trying to predict things that you can't predict, guys. You can't even predict the weather 7 days out. How do you prove to me climate change? You can't even predict the weather 8 days from now. I'm here to tell you guys that climate change is a foe. It's a foe. It's just because I was discouraged from publishing certain things because it went against what the story was. And that's when I became really disillusioned. I'm like, this isn't science. This is just political science is what this is in the name of environmental. Anyway, but I have a PhD now, guys. My name is Yogi Chris PhD. That's not going away in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. To the day I die, I'm a PhD. And not like Martin Luther King PhD who plagiarized his PhD, and everyone knows it. Just do a little research. Even the university knows it. Plagiarized 40% of his doctorate. But they had already given him a national holiday. So when they discovered that he just copied someone else's PhD, they didn't take it away. But mine is real. I actually earned it. And it's never going away. So was it worth
I think it's very respectable.
Oh, thank you. Thank
you. Dr. Chris, you worked hard, and I respect you at both levels. I respect you at all the hard work you've done to get your PhD. And I also respect you at all the hard work you've done to become an amazing yogi. They're both disciplines, and I think it earns a tremendous amount of respect, and it's well worth it. Especially, it's a good rule in life to complete what you start. And this is a masculinity thing. I think it's a good characteristic, an evolved characteristic of men, is that we actually do what we say we're going to do and have integrity. And I want to just acknowledge the integrity. That's what a man does. He says he's going to do something, and then he completes what he says he's going to do. And so I think it's very respectable.
I want to, because we're doing a split screen on Instagram, nobody on Instagram can hear you talking, Joe. They'll just hear me and Akash talking. But I really appreciate you saying that. And you stimulated a thought in me is the benefits of having a PhD, Akash, are going to continue to accrue over my life. And so is it worth it now is a little bit harder to measure. Over the next 10 years, I will continue to benefit from the PhD, but I don't have to pay any more. I don't have to pay any more time. I don't have to go to school any longer. I keep getting benefits, and now I've already paid all of my dues. And so I think in the long run, absolutely, it's going to be worth it. But in hindsight, if I could go back, no, I wouldn't have done it. Which is a weird thing to say because I met my girlfriend and I got into yoga. But I was offered $60,000, $70,000 a year jobs traveling the country for an industrial engineering firm, and I turned it down. And going back in hindsight, I probably would have taken it and just gotten into yoga, and who knows where I would have ended up. But that's what I have to say about that. Is that helpful for you? You're muted on Zoom, by the way, brother.
Yes, Yogi Chris. One of the things that came up for me yesterday, while I was talking to Yuri, and I don't know, spontaneously, it's really, really interesting, is the Akashic Records. This is something that's by probably the Akashic Records themselves come up at this particular juncture in my life. I've had a book at home that my grandmother had left me, and it details what they are and how to communicate through them. But I'd never looked at it or anything like that. It had just been a book that was sitting on my bookshelf. Yesterday, after the No Books Given podcast, I went to sleep, and I somehow came across a YouTube video on it. And so before I continue forward, allow me to explain at least what I know of it, and then maybe you can detail a little bit of what you know about it. My understanding of it thus far is that It's a science using quantum physics where they are these records of the universe. It's like you're able to get in touch with the most fundamental aspects of the universe and communicate across time, across space, across dimension. It's the most fundamental records, if you will, of the universe. And in some ways, I'm kind of interpreting it as the matrix itself. But you're able to communicate from telepathically through it. You're able to communicate across time through it, and so on and so forth. So Nikola Tesla, kind of from the video that I was watching, was one of the people who kind of got a better understanding of this, and that's where the whole dialogue or quote that he has around the universe is all about energy, frequency, and vibration, very much aligns with that particular field of thought. I recommend everyone to take a quick look at this. I'm not the best at explaining it right now because I've just been introduced to it nonetheless. One of the things that I've been interested in is communicating telepathically, actually, and understanding from Arash's teachings how to apply those teachings in terms of telepathic communication. I think getting closer to this understanding as I've tapped into this field. But Yogi Crest, my question to you is, do you know anything about the Akashic Records? If you do, would you speak a little bit about them and your experience with them?
I know everything about it, but I don't know what they say about it. So whatever I say is going to probably contradict whatever YouTube videos or scholars would say on it. And I would also say Arash Dibazar's teaching is that all communication is telepathy. Specifically, what you're talking about is silent communication, which is called telepathy, or silent telepathy. But the idea of I have an idea in my head and I transmit it through the ether and it goes into your head and you hear my idea is communication. Yeah. So, I mean, Akashic Records, I mean, yeah, the part of environmental sciences, it was so beautiful, actually. There was a lot of wisdom in environmental science because it's nature. It's a study of nature. Nature isn't everything. And the idea of ontology is that, ontology, O-N-T-ology, or whatever, is that the system remembers everything that ever happened to it. There is no restoring to a prior date. It's not like a computer where you just go back. Even there's residue. Like whatever happened to the computer, there's residue in the imprints and the circuits and whatever. The system remembers everything that ever happened to it. The universe remembers everything that ever happened to it. There is no forgetting what happened. You might have amnesia, but the system remembers. The chemistry in the system changed when that event happened. You know, when you were in shock or a hormone release or something, and there's a cascade of things that happen, and there's always going to be the effect of that. And with very subtle perception, I mean, we're talking subtle. I mean, you have 70 trillion cells inside your body. Each one of those cells has trillions of molecules. That's trillions times a trillions of atoms inside of you. That's a really big computer. That's a super computer. That if one atom flipped like that, that means something, like in genetics. If you can tap into the most subtle elements that are in your body, you'll find a recorded history of everything that's ever happened to you and how it relates to the universe around you, because then extrapolate that to the universe around you. This room I'm in has so many trillions and trillions and trillions of atoms and whatever. And it sounds like reductionist, but or it sounds like too fine. And it is really, I mean, there's stories of ancient yogi masters that could teleport, right? Or dissolve their body into atoms and just float through the air. Because right now, there are potassium molecules, there are all kinds of solid molecules in the atmosphere that if I could tap into potential, universal potential, all of these atoms move on what's called a, I forget the kind of probability curve, but basically there's a mean, and at the end, there is a really fast molecules. So most molecules are moving around just at a normal kind of speed. But if you go to the end of the spectrum, there's always going to be some portion that are moving extremely fast. This is why the atmosphere of the Earth is actually getting lighter. We're losing a lot of hydrogen. We're losing water because hydrogen escapes the Earth's gravity because the tail end of that is too fast and Earth can't hold on to it. And so there's always molecules moving really fast. And due to quantum physics, it's there if you look at it, but it's not there if you don't look at it. And so if I'm there and I can concentrate and I can coalesce and I can bring together the material around me, there's in any material around me, there are some of those molecules are moving really fast. And if I can locate them and coalesce them with my intention, my volition, my energy, my will, I materialize. I can dematerialize. And so a person that can tune into all of the constituents of their body can dematerialize and move with their essence. Keep almost like a cloud, almost like you ever see those clouds of locusts or birds or something, and they just kind of, and then they come together and then expand and come together. A yogi master, grandmaster, like the top, like Himalayas, like maybe 1 or 2 people around today, that nobody, very like a dozen people have ever met in their life, like that kind of rarity. Disappear, move, appear again, disappear, move, appear again. And so the Akashic Records, that's on that level. And to bring understanding, when you look at that level of the universe, that you could call it the zeros and ones, the matrix, the sacred geometry that underlies everything. It's just a bunch of fractals. We're a bunch of fractals. You look deeper, it's deeper levels of fractals. You look deeper, it's deeper layers of fractals. You go to the deepest Planck distance, at the smallest conceivable distance, there's going to be fractal geometry. And that's the zeros and ones code of the universe where the Akashic Records are stored. And if you can tune into with the sensitivity to see the pattern, read the pattern, and then bring that understanding back to our mundane human language and then interpret it for people, then yeah, this is going into like Edgar Cayce kind of, reading the universe. And then take it, whatever anybody tells you about what they read, with a grain of salt. Like, only the success is the proof. Does it benefit you? Frank White, sorcerer extraordinaire, blew me away when he tells me things that I don't tell people. And it's like, where did you read that? And I don't care if he read it on my face. I don't care if he tapped into the sacred geometry of the universe. I don't care if a spirit entity told him. He told me something I haven't told people. How did he know? That's his craft. And okay, you win. You have my trust now, But if they're just saying things that sound fantastic but can't be falsified, then I just take it with a grain of salt. Like, that's interesting, That's all I know about it. So I don't know everything about it, but that's what I know about it.
That's very interesting, Yogi Chris. To bring it to a couple other questions, and again, if there's any questions on the audience, feel free to either type them on Zoom or type them on the Instagram itself. Yesterday, I had this quick question written down on Friday night while I was preparing. What does the masculine do to gain the respect of the feminine?
Well, that's fascinating.
Yogi Chris, you're muted on the Zoom.
Yeah. To gain the respect of the feminine, those are demonstrations of higher value. The feminine is a really general term. I want the respect of individuals. The respect of the feminine, not one woman represents all femininity, and femininity is not represented by any single woman. So I want the respect of an individual. A woman may be feminine, but she might be crazy. She might have wrong programming. I'm not looking for her respect. A long time ago, I've heard many definitions, but my teacher, Arash Zepar, said that respect is acknowledging something for what it is. It's when you respect something. So I respect the woman for what she is, how she behaves. It's amazing. I just signed up a person for my silent flute program. Yesterday, we almost got in an argument. It was a really bad sale. I had another silent flute client there. I was like, hey, what's your experience? And she told her experience. And then the first one started like, there's tension, argument. I wasn't in the right headspace. We almost like kind of argued and then we left, and I was agitated for like 2 hours because I was like, damn it, like it was perfect for her. It was a perfect program. Then at some point I realized, and I said this on the Sangha last night, the talk I gave with Yuri, that the frustration was growth. This is growth. I'm growing right now. And when I interpreted the frustration as growth, the energy dissipated. And I felt good. I laughed it off a little bit. And I thought to myself immediately, it wasn't even, I don't know where this thought came from. Call it the Akashic Records or whatever. The thought, the telepathy, the whatever came into my head that now she's going to sign up. She's going to sign up. She just signed up this morning. And with her energy completely changed. She came to the interaction just like so receptive and open, and started talking about how women are crazy and they're hormonal. And she works with women and she really dislikes it. She wishes there were more guys around. And it just starts talking about the complications, the difficulties of not having control over your mind, not having control over your emotions, especially more so as a woman. So having the respect. Okay, so the question I see, Joe Nicasio, business coach extraordinaire, he types, is respect automatic or earned? No, it's not automatic. And respect is, it takes the eyes to see it. To recognize something for what it is, there's a level of intelligence and of perceptiveness, and then certain qualities should be demonstrated if you want them to respect that. You're going to be respected anyway. No matter what, you're going to be respected for something. But it just might not be the thing that you want to be respected for. So you might be respected for being a funny guy, but you're like, what do you mean funny guy? Like a comedian? Like, what do you mean funny guy? Like, you might be respected as being very sensitive, but you're trying to be macho. And it's like, well, fuck, I don't want to be respected for my sensitivity. I want to be respected for my macho-ness or whatever. But then you come across harsh when you try to be macho, and then you get respected for, you're just really blunt, and you're kind of rude. And they're respecting you in that way. What if you were trying to be rude? Then you would feel like, oh, they see me for what I am. So, what does the masculine need to do for the feminine to respect? If I was going to say me as an individual, as a man, what do I as a man need to do for a female to respect what I want her to respect? Is demonstrate these qualities in a way that generates attraction in her. So I demonstrate the qualities that I want to be respected for in a way that generates attraction in her, which are the main attraction switches, the secondary attraction switches, pre-selection, leader of men, healthy emotions, successful risk taker, and protector of loved ones. And so if in my stories, in my communication, in my gestures, because I can be talking about, let's say, I was training yoga with the yoga master in India, and start talking about yoga, or I was in my yoga practice and I saw God and this and that, and I had all these healthy emotions, and then I told my girlfriend about it, and then, whatever. Like, if in my storytelling, I can trigger those attraction switches in her, but staying true to who I want to represent as a man, then it will generate respect from her. And then over time, that respect needs to be consistent. The respect that you're probably seeking is a consistency in her behavior towards you and how she sees you. So it's continually demonstrating these qualities over and over and over through time, and proving that you are at those things that she admires, that you are better at them than she is, but without rubbing it in her face, so to speak. But when she sees that you are better at the things that she wants to be good at, she'll start to respect you for those things. And it's a constant reminder, because her emotions will cause her decision-making processes to change. So she'll see, this is a big thing, that your emotions change what words you access. Your emotions change what behaviors you access and how you communicate. Anger has a different dictionary than joy. And given that the female goes through 10 times more or more emotional fluctuations throughout the day, her dictionary is changing 10 or more times more than me throughout the day. So whatever words she used to make a decision an hour ago might change this time because her words are different. And so it's a continually demonstrating it throughout her spectrum of emotions, which takes a calibration and an adaptability. The masculine man, I believe, is extremely adaptable, very, very adaptable in his communication. Almost like so adaptable that it's hard to pinpoint where he is. He's precise, but I mean, who is Akash based on your communication? Like, I can hear it in your voice, but you should be so adaptable in your voice inflection and so, malleable in what words you can choose. You should be able to talk like you were in the ghetto. You should be able to talk like you were at a research conference. You should be able to talk like you're in a yoga class. You should be able to talk to a homeless person and to a supermodel and have a different dictionary for all of them. And Akash is still there in all of those. But your language will change. So the essence of Akash doesn't change, but your language changes. And one thing that I found that the woman respects highly is when she sees your essence stays consistent, but your language changes and influences other people. When she sees you influence other people. Here's a big one. Early in my relationship, and then I'll hand it back over. Early in my relationship, I was very strict and corrected my girlfriend a lot, and probably harshly. I wasn't soft. And I'll probably keep softening up as I interact with many more other women. It softens me up when I interact with her. But I noticed that there were some conflicts around that I wasn't so correcting of other women. And so that was a source of thing. And then the storyline would be, well, I don't have enough compliance from those women to really be correcting them. So what they say or what they do goes because I'm not invested in them. But respect really, really came when my girlfriend noticed other women complying to my corrections. When I would correct other women in front of her, my girlfriend would, you could see the respect. She would posture up. She would come closer. She would hold me. She would tell me she appreciated that later. And so that's a single kind of, it's not really a technique, but that's a datum that you can look for of, can you persuade or influence or generate attraction in another woman in front of your woman? And that will generate respect in her for you. I don't know. Does that make sense? What about you? How do you think the masculine, earns respect or creates respect in the feminine?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point of view and perspective, Yuri Chris. For myself, what I've come to understand more in terms of the masculine gaining respect of the feminine is, well, if you ever want to gain respect, you first have to give it. So I have this fundamental belief that give what you always, or give what you expect to receive. So this could be anything. If you want to receive money, give money. If you want to receive love, give love. If you want to receive happiness, give happiness, and so on and so forth. If you want to receive respect, give respect. So in this regard, giving respect to another, whether it be a conversation, whether it be the chaos in the universe or in your emotions or what have you, respecting and like you mentioned, I think a great definition you just said here earlier today was recognizing it for what it is. I think that's a great definition for respect. Seeing that the feminine is the feminine, or chaos is chaos, or what have you. That's when you're able to have the other see you for what you are. It was an interesting question that kind of arose while I was in Friday nights. I usually go out and I'll sit down at my local bar, and I've gotten to know a couple of the bartenders and such over there. And one of the girl bartenders comes over to me, and she's got like a low cut top, like she's got like a really nice ass, and all the guys are just kind of like falling over and like trying to talk to her. Meanwhile, I was in I've done a private with her a couple times, and we've got a good rapport and relationship. So like when I see her and when she sees me, it's like a mutual respect of like human to human first before it is like man to woman. And she comes over to me, like runs up, and you can just tell that she's just like, her heart's like totally open, and she's just very engaged in communication. Once I get there, she kind of like runs over and says hi and brings me whatever I want, which is not the same type of relationship that any other of the men have there with her. So that's kind of what sparked the thought itself, was how does a man earn the respect of a woman? As I was like looking around, I was like, why is this happening to me, but not to all of the other men? And so it was an interesting way of being. So I'll pass it back to you, Yogi Chris.
Yeah, it's really stimulating when I hear the story. It's stimulating a lot of thoughts. Definitely honesty. Consistency and honesty will earn the respect. And honesty on like a brutal level. Like the honesty I had with the woman yesterday, it was kind of argumentative, but the argument was because she was saying something that was false, and I was correcting it in a tone that became argumentative, but there was truth. And that honesty has resulted in a sign-up and respect. Now, respect is also like contextual. So you guys are relating as people, asexually, and in that context of like teacher-student, of like I'm just teacher, you're student, but it's not like man and woman. Even though that energy dynamic is there as masculine and feminine, but it's just without the sexual libido. And so as long as you stay in that frame, that respect is there. As soon as you jump out of that frame, you'll see that same respect doesn't translate. It's in a different box of its own. And then immediately I think these last two thoughts. One is that her respect is very volatile, more so than a man's respect. I don't expect the woman to have the same kind of capacity to uphold her respect in a way that a man does, because her decision-making is so much more influenced by emotional fluctuations. And so logically, she could be wanting respect, but emotionally, she's acting like a little girl or pouty or something like that. We all have something like this. The little boy in me comes out. The pouty boy comes out in me sometimes. And so I have a consistency in those levels, and I'm continually becoming more consistent. but every woman I've met is much less consistent. And so I'm not looking for a consistency in her respect. I know it'll fluctuate. I'm looking for an average. I'm looking for when she's not so emotional, what is that like? And then understanding she's going to go through emotional fluctuations. Can you contain your communication? The closer she is to me, I teach her how to contain that communication. The last thing I say is, well, I actually kind of lost it. So respect, it was something really, really potent too. Respect for the other person. Oh, this is what it was. Respect out of fear or respect out of love. Respect out of fear will always win. This is my opinion. Because love is a feeling that, and let me explain here for a second. Just what do I mean by fear of loss? Fear of loss. Because there's enough people, there's fear of like coercion, of like hurting you or whatever. That's not really respect. I mean, that is a respect, like respect my force, but it's not the respect that we're looking for. If I want respect, I want to be so valuable to the person that they respect me, because if they don't, they lose me. But if they respect my love for them, then they should be afraid that they'll lose the love. They're losing something. If they don't fear the loss, then their respect goes out the window at their whim. So there needs to be something so valuable in their eyes that if it's taken away, that they are afraid of it if it's taken away. They will not be as well off if it's taken away. And that earns their respect. When they see it, they got to see it. It's like Joe said, there are some people in a comment, he said, there are some people that you just can't earn their respect. Unless they're like totally like checked out, like psycho, which is really minority. It's more of a minority than we think. Everybody, it's just they got to get it. Like we said in the Sangha yesterday with Yuri, it doesn't matter how respectful you are. It matters that they get that you're being respectful. If they don't get that you're being respectful, you could be respectful until you die, the day you die. If they never got it, then they just don't get it. And then your communication was off. And then you'll die thinking, well, I was respectful and they just never got me. On the other side, it's, you could be disrespectful, but they get, oh, he just likes me so much, or he respects me so much. You decide, which one would you rather have? I'd rather have the second one. I'd rather them get that I'm respectful than me trying so hard to be respectful. And, so that's kind of what I would say about that. This is useful for me, talking these things out. I don't talk about some of these things, so it's like connecting dots.
No, I love this. And one of my personal viewpoints is that when we talk to others, when you talk externally, there's a talk that's also going on internally. This is the law of balance, right? Or if you go one way, you need to go in the opposite direction in the other way in order to because we stay at equilibrium. So everything that we say when we're talking outwards is actually a conversation that we're having when we're to ourselves. I really do believe everything that we see around us is different parts of our mind. And so when we interact or engage with one part of that, with that particular part of our mind, we're kind of like we're like shining a light on it, and we're seeing it again for a particular moment in time, and recognizing that. So really, really something important. And I understand hearing these words come from you is like from the inside, these words are coming in and ringing in to teach me on the outside of how to be, or to remind me and to recognize. So it's really, really interesting hearing all these things. And that these are the reasons why I like these kinds of conversations in general, particularly with you, Yogi Chris, Joe, and whomever else engages with us, Yuri as well, because it is showing ourselves different parts of ourselves, but using external stimulus versus internal stimulus. I think at times we'll need something from the outside to impact us, to reconfigure our inside. And there's other times where our inside, we use that to reconfigure the outside. There's certain times where we need communication one way or another way to really impact and change behavior in a way that our will is aligned with. So completely feel you on that regard. We are getting towards the tail end of the hour right now, so I say maybe we take the next 5 or 10 minutes. If you guys have any questions, feel free to send them over. If not, Yogi Chris, I think we start moving towards the closing pieces. So I'll turn it back over to you at this point.
Oh yeah. I don't see any questions. I see Joe makes great comment of someone else's respect or lack of respect doesn't define me. Of course, external validation feels good, but it doesn't define me as a man. Of course, and yeah. So let's see. If I had any closing words, I was going to wrap this up. If somebody made it to the end of this podcast recording and I had some closing words for them, say communication must become part of your practice. If you don't have a practice yet, first understand that what you're doing, living, is a practice. You're practicing living. What you do every day, you're practicing. However you wake up, you're practicing that way of waking up every day. However you go to sleep, you're practicing that way of going to sleep. Whatever you read, you're practicing that subject. If you play video games, you're practicing that video. You're practicing things. I practice yoga. I practice talking. I practice so much, which is basically everything, right? Because Akash is just talking about internal talk. Almost always there's something being said on the inside, even when you don't think there is. If there's a feeling, you're saying something. And if you're not saying something and you're not feeling anything, you're in a really blissful place. How about you go out and interact with the world and share your bliss with people? As soon as you start doing that, watch as some turbulence comes up inside. So it's just latent, what they call it. It's just like mud that's settled to the bottom, but it's still dirty water. Look upon talking as part of your practice. And this is a rabbit hole. You'll deeply get into phonetics, how to enunciate properly, some word magic and neurolinguistic programming. How do you rearrange your words and your syntax to create a bigger effect on yourself, on other people? These are things that we teach, Join the Silent Flute if you're interested in some of this kind of content. Join our private Facebook group called Rising Suns, where Akash gives some private content, and we'll do some monthly lectures there also for donation. But other than that, look upon and those links are all in the description. You can find our Instagram there. Send us a message if you have any questions you'd like to be included on this podcast. We do this at 12 noon every day. During the weekdays, I do it with Yuri. During the weekends, I do it with Akash. And yeah, send us any messages, or if you can't make the broadcast time, then we can include it in our broadcast. Look upon your talking as a spiritual practice. This is what you're here to do as a person. And if you want to earn respect from women, if you want to have an understanding of masculinity, femininity, if you want to dive deeper into your spiritual practices and realize the Akashic Records, or your life before this life, or what's the purpose of your living, or spiritual questions, you want to see auras or things like this, communication is essential for it. Clearing your mind is essential. And to really clear your mind, not just settle the mud to the bottom, but to clear your mind is going to require you exercise your human superpower, which is talking. And so just because you're not good at it at the beginning, that didn't stop you from picking up the video game. It didn't stop you from picking up the baseball bat. It didn't stop you from eating. Even though you were a bad cook, you still got hungry. Eventually, you'll get hungry for this kind of development, and talking is going to be, in my opinion, and I'm doing quite well with myself. In my opinion, talking is it. So get into it. Use it as a spiritual practice. See it as a spiritual practice. And we'll see you in the next broadcast. So I want to hand it over to Akash for any closing statements, and then we'll just tie it off.
Yes. So 2 closing statements. One, I know a lot of our conversation today was very mental and kind of in the mind. And that's something that it's very easy to get stuck in our thoughts and in our mind. One thing I encourage all of you guys on the Instagram and on Zoom today to do is get into your body and feel a little bit more. So that could be within your heart, and really just feel emotions and notice them, for one. For 2, I would say literally feel your physical body. So this could be anything from just basic stretching, stand up tall, bend at the waist and reach towards the floor. Something as simple as that. Get in touch with some of the muscles that you have not used prior. Yogi Chris and I can definitely show you how to do that if you come out with us with some questions in that regard. The last thing I want to leave you guys on is one of the universal truths that I've learned from yoga class. This truth is fear and pain are life's greatest teachers. And with that, Yogi Chris, I think we end podcast for today.
Namaste, everyone.
Namaste.